Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to Box Office Addict. I know it's been a long time coming, so we're in a return now. Return of the Mac, which is the best song of all time, by the way. Okay, so we're going to be talking about Ant-Man 3's insane drop. It's the biggest drop in MCU history. The unexpected success, although I thought it would do well on opening weekend, of Cocaine Bear. And the also shocking success of Jesus Revolution, starring Kelsey Grammer. I think this director now has had 4 movies in a row do very well, and they all got A+ cinema scores. He's just made these Christian movies that have been well received. And then we could talk about where Avatar, Puss in Boots, Magic Mike, and all these other movies are at. So let's start at the bottom and we'll work our way up to the actual movies of the week. So if you're looking at Megan here, Megan has dropped off, and it doesn't look like it's going to reach 100 mil domestically, which I think is disappointing considering it opened to 30, and it had such good word of mouth. I mean, I know the budget's only 20, but still, I did think this was going to make over 100 million, so I'm not sure what happened there. But still, 171 million worldwide, hard to complain. The Titanic re-release is at 53 million. A Man Called Otto, starring Tom Hanks, did shockingly well, 103 million worldwide, so kind of hard to ignore that. So there is room for adult features just for old people. Speaking of movies for old people, 80 for Brady is at 36 million. I would say that's had a very disappointing run. Magic Mike's Last Dance, $46 million worldwide, not even close to the first 2 movies. Don't know what to think about that. I guess it was just bad advertising. I didn't even know the movie was coming out. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is an interesting one, though. This is a movie that had an abysmal opening weekend, and then since that point has had phenomenal word of mouth. I mean, this movie has genuinely had the best holds, I think, outside of maybe Top Gun, of last year going into this year. So if you look at it, the movie opened at $12 million, 18 million over holiday weekend. Then it did 26 over the Christmas weekend. Then it did 16, 22, 13, 14, 18, 11, 10, 7, 5, 5, 7, and now 4. If you look at some of these drops, 4%, 25%, 18%, other weekends plus 6.8%, plus 35.3%. I mean, that's phenomenal. This is just phenomenal holds. And it's weird, this movie was out on streaming while it was still in theaters, so it was still doing this while you can watch this at home. The first Puss in Boots, I think, though, made more than this. It made over $500 million worldwide, but we'll check that out real quick. I think it made 549 million, but I'm just going off the top of my head. 554 million. It did beat it domestically. And if you actually look, the first Puss in Boots didn't have a great opening weekend at 34 million. So honestly, domestically, I think this is an overperformance for Puss in Boots too, especially since animated films haven't been doing well post-pandemic. But still, you would like it to, surpass the first one and make like 600 million. But honestly, 442 million worldwide is not bad, and this movie's loved. It's one of the best reviewed movies. I mean, honestly, if I was picking the Oscars, I would give this the Oscar over Pinocchio by Del Toro, but they're just going to give that one the Oscar because it's Del Toro. Let's talk about Avatar. 4.7 million, 28% drop. It doesn't look like it's going to reach 700 mil domestically. I would say that's out of the question. 680 seems like the cap, maybe 690 on a high end. I would just be shocked if it makes 700 million. So it won't pass Top Gun. Having said that, the 1.6 international is fucking insane. Those are insane numbers. Like that's more than Top Gun Maverick's entire gross, counting everything. So it's at 2.2 billion, 6.7. So 2.3 I think is a lock. I think that's the end point here. I do think it could make another, like 32, 33 million dollars that it needs to be at 2.3. So I think 2.3 billion is the ceiling. Not counting re-releases. I think if this had gotten a Russia release, it probably would have made 2.4 billion. So overall, I mean, I haven't talked about this movie in a context like this, but I've talked about it in separate videos. This is just one of the greatest box office runs of all time. and it was hiding there the whole time. We didn't see it. Let's talk about Jesus Revolution, though. I'm very impressed by this. 15.5 million in 2,400 theaters. Those are good numbers. Uh, Saw a lot of marketing for this movie actually on like Roku and Hulu and crap. And I actually thought it looked pretty good. I think having Kelsey Grammer helps a lot, and also the angle of the hippies and approaching it from a different angle, not so much from a boomer angle. And honestly, anytime you have Jesus in a title, like these are just great titles, both of these movies, Jesus Revolution and Cocaine Bear. How can you top those titles? That's how you sell a movie. I would say Cocaine Bear is analogous to Megan, though, where it's just lots of promotion on social media, a very catchy name. I mean, because the entire trailer is just people saying the whole time, it's a bear on cocaine. A bear did a bag of cocaine. The bear took all of our cocaine. That's all they say throughout the entire trailer. And yeah, isn't this Elizabeth Banks? What a weird follow up to her Charlie's Angels debacle in the Pitch Perfect sequel she directed. This is very strange. It's like she knew she couldn't get a bigger movie made after Charlie's Angels bombed, so she went with genre low budget horror movie because that's the only stuff that makes any money these days. So she's like, fuck it, I'll do Cocaine Bear. The movie got mixed reviews. I don't know if it's going to hold as well as some other movies that play like this. I don't know if the audience reception is going to be there, but still 23 million opening weekend. This movie should be able to make a profit, so kudos to them, honestly. They've done a really good job with this. Who released this? Universal. So Universal's having a winning year, honestly. Puss in Boots. I know Top Gun's Paramount, but that's Universal, I believe, right? So, because yeah, then there's Paramount, but I think Paramount's a company they're associated with Universal, but I could be wrong. So honestly, and Universal also did Megan. So in general, Universal's had a lot of success outside of Disney, which is usually dominates the box office. But Disney is, if you've been paying attention, has fallen considerably in the last couple years. But let's talk about this Ant-Man drop. So the reviews were bad. I think it's under 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. The Metacritic score is bad. I know some people were saying that they love this movie and the critics were wrong, but clearly the response isn't there. This movie should have a better second weekend than this. A drop was expected. A drop over 60% was expected, but this fell on the high end. Like I would have guessed 35 million, 38 million. The fact that it came down to 32 million is abysmal. So we have a good opening, 106 million, 120 million over the 4-day holiday, open to 225 million worldwide. Here we are 2 weeks in, 167 mil domestic, 363 million worldwide. So here comes the question, how bad is this going to do? Because the first Ant-Man made 520 million, the second one made 620 million. I don't know if this is going to pass Ant-Man 2. It could. You would have to expect that this is going to still do, I don't know, it should be able to reach 250 million domestically, and you would have to think that it's going to get close to 400 million internationally. So you would think that 650 million is in play, but it could go under 650 million. And this is real. Some people are going to say, oh, it's Ant-Man, he doesn't do as well, but this is introducing Kang, who's going to be the main villain in the next Avengers film. So I'm sick of people like trying to move the goalposts for Disney. Like, well, they didn't expect Wakanda Forever to make 1 billion. They didn't expect Doctor Strange 2 to make 1 billion. Yes, they did. They fucking did with both of those movies. And I'm not saying they thought this movie would make 1 billion, but I'm sure they were hoping, 800 million at least, at a minimum. I mean, because you got to look at it. This happened with Thor too. I mean, Thor. Let's go in here. Thor, the recent Thor by Taika Waititi, Love and Thunder, only did 760 million. And the Thor that came out before that, Ragnarok, although it didn't make as much domestically, made 855 million. So that's a huge decline. And we won't even bring the Black Panther decline up because I get it, Chadwick Boseman died. But still, I mean, these are not great numbers. And you can excuse Black Widow and the Eternals for bombing during the pandemic. Shang-Chi didn't actually do that well. All those movies made about 400 million. And I think they all had budgets over 200 million. So you have to think here with Ant-Man having a budget over 200 million and it's probably just going to gross 650 million, I think, is the high end here. 700 million maybe if the international numbers do better, although I don't think they're showing up. Audiences aren't showing up for this anywhere. I mean, this is a bad sign. This is a really bad sign. Everyone's going to try to soften this and make it not look so bad, but this is actually really, really bad for Marvel, and bad for Disney. They can't be happy with these numbers because the opening weekend just wasn't big enough to justify a drop that big. You can have a drop that's like 60% if you open big enough. Like Spider-Man No Way Home had a pretty big drop in its second weekend, but it opened at 260 million. So it made enough money in that opening weekend that it could have a big drop like that. And then you have movies like Avatar that its second and third weekend were insane. Like, this is really when Avatar started making its money, because the first weekend was $134 million, and if you remember, all the articles were saying how disappointing that was. And then the second weekend was 63 million. And even at that point, some people were saying, okay, that's a good hold, but that's it. But then it held over for the holiday over to 95 million. And then the weekend after that, it does 67 million, and then 88 million into New Year's. It went up. It went up in its third fucking weekend. And then in the fourth weekend, 32% drop. Next weekend, 28% drop. Then 38, 20, 29. And then you see how a movie that opens at 130 million can make over 600 million. So that's just an example. That's like, although I guess it's technically a Disney film, so they have that going for them. But that's to make the comparison when you talk about these big drops. You're like, well, Ant-Man didn't have the opening weekend. That's true, and I just said that, but Avatar also didn't have the opening weekend. So then you could say, okay, it benefited from the holidays. Well, Ant-Man has no competition. I mean, if Cocaine Bear and Jesus Revolution's your competition for a main title MCU film introducing their new villain, well, he was introduced in Loki, but in the movie franchise, making him a big deal, you have to do better than this. I mean, this should at least be at like 45, 50 million in its second weekend. This is embarrassing. And the superhero fatigue does seem to be kicking in a little bit, because these lower budgeted films like Megan and Cocaine Bear and Jesus Revolution are the ones that it's like, oh, that makes sense why you would release that and you can turn a profit on that. Even though some other films that are lower budgeted, like Knock at the Cabin and Magic Mike, aren't doing great numbers, I think studios are probably going to lean on these lower budgeted films a little bit more and maybe not keep throwing out these $200 million plus movies if they're not going to make, like, a billion at least ever so often, or 800 million. I mean, that's the thing. It doesn't have to be a billion, but it has to be better than this, especially domestically. Like Everything Everywhere at All at Once is a good example of that, right? So it made 107 million, and I believe the budget was around 20 million. So more films like that, as opposed to Wakanda Forever, which did well. I mean, it made 858 million, but it's just not quite enough to justify the studio making so many of these movies. Maybe if you only had one or two superhero films a year from a studio, it might make more sense, a summer release and a holiday release. But right now, we know that there's more Marvel films and television shows coming out down the road. So I think it's just going to get more convoluted unless people are going to be into it. But kudos to Elizabeth Banks. I'm not a fan of her. Well, I'm a fan of how she looks, but not a fan of her as a director. I don't think she's a very good filmmaker. And she's a decent comedic actress. But, hey, kudos to her. I do think this movie's going to drop. I don't think it's going to be one of those things where the next weekend it's like more people go to see it because of word of mouth. I do think everyone who wanted to go see it kind of rushed out to see it, because this was in 3,500 theaters. 23 million isn't a great opening. And they really leaned on a gimmick here to get those numbers. But still, credit's where it's due. In this current climate of the box office, those aren't bad numbers. Let's see if there's anything else worth mentioning. Emily, starring Aubrey Plaza. Wait, I was thinking of Emily the Criminal. This is a different movie. My bad. Planes at 32 million. Oh, they re-released Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. What the fuck? I wish the Banshees of Inisherin would have done, but I mean, I guess 43 million isn't bad, but that's the kind of movie I wish made 100 million. And then The Fablemans. Jesus Christ, this is embarrassing. 31 million on a budget of 40 million. That is abysmal. That's even, I mean, West Side Story probably lost more money because it cost more, but still, Spielberg's last two movies have been major bombs. And then The Whale, which I thought was doing relatively well, has fallen off. I mean, it's not a bomb or anything, but I did think it was going to do better based off the averages it was doing in early release. But that's just kind of how it is with like these guys like Paul Thomas Anderson or Darren Aronofsky when they release a movie. It does really well in LA and New York the first few weeks and then completely drops off a few weeks in, and then their movies never really make money. And they're just kind of hoping, I think the studio's just hoping they're going to win an Oscar. And in this case, they don't have any nominations but one. Oh yeah, and then a shout out to Violent Night, which made 75 million. That actually did fairly well, and they are working on a sequel to that. So, story of the week should be Cocaine Bear, but it's going to be that Ant-Man dropped so much, and is going to put the question, which has been continuing conversation, of where the MCU is going to be in the future, and if they can start hitting those billion-dollar numbers that they were consistently doing, in 2018, 2019. Captain Marvel made over $1 billion. So, like, is that the expectation for Marvels when that comes out, that it needs to make 1 billion? Like, what if it does these kind of numbers? What if it only makes like $600 million? It doesn't mean they're losing money. They're not losing money on movies like that. But I don't know if they're making enough money either. That's the question. I don't know. Thank you for watching.